Welcome, gents. A man's real journey doesn't begin when the world notices him. It begins when he stops caring if they do. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit into the world's timeline, you're not alone. Society pushes men to prove themselves. Most men spend their early years trying to fit in, chasing approval, and playing by rules that were never designed to benefit them. But for Sigma males, real life doesn't start in their 20s. It begins at 30, sometimes even 40. Because they aren't built for instant gratification. They're built for mastery, independence, and long-term power. If your younger years felt like a constant uphill battle, like you never truly belonged, like the world was forcing you into a mold that didn't fit, you're not broken. You're just a Sigma male in the making. While others peak early and burn out, you're only getting started. By 30, the noise fades. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking validation. The skills, wisdom, and resilience you've been quietly building finally start paying off. By 40, you see the truth. Most people spent decades chasing illusions, but you built something real, unshakable self-sufficiency. Society glorifies youth, but Sigma males aren't meant to shine in their early years. Your strength is in the long game. Let others rush. You move with purpose. Let them seek approval. You master silence. When they panic, you remain calm because you know something they don't. The best part of your life is just beginning. Let's get started, gents. Number 1, you see how many men stay trapped and you refuse to join them. By the time you hit 30, the illusion fades. You start seeing the truth about most men. Their lives aren't theirs at all. They're stuck in jobs they despise, but they can't leave because they're drowning in debt. They stay in relationships that drain them because they fear loneliness more than misery. They repeat the same self-destructive habits year after year because breaking free requires more discipline than they're willing to develop. And you? You recognize the trap, but you don't fall for it. While others are chasing short-term pleasure, you focus on long-term power. You don't tie yourself to a paycheck. You build financial leverage. You don't settle for relationships that drain you. You master solitude and attract only what adds value. You don't make excuses. You adapt, learn, and evolve. Then comes 40, and by then you see the full picture. Most men will never escape. They will spend decades complaining about their jobs but never take action. They will stay in unfulfilling relationships because leaving is too hard. They will avoid discomfort at all costs, even if it means staying miserable forever. And as painful as it is to watch, you accept that you can't save them. That's when you realize how rare you are. Not because you're smarter or luckier, but because you had the courage to break free. You chose discipline over comfort, purpose over approval, and growth over stagnation. And because of that, you move differently. You're not weighed down by regret, resentment, or the fear of what if. You own your life. If you're in your 20s, pay attention. If you're in your 30s, make your escape. And if you're in your 40s, look around. Most men are still trapped. But you're free. And that is what truly sets you apart. Number 2, the years of proving yourself are over. For most of your life, you were told that success meant impressing others, that you had to prove yourself to your family, your peers, your employers, even strangers who barely know you. Your 20s were filled with pressure to conform, to play by society's rules, to be somebody in the eyes of others. You chased validation, even when it felt empty. You explained yourself, even when no one really listened. You fought for recognition, even when it wasn't worth fighting for. But here's the truth. Sigma males aren't built for that game. And by the time you hit 30, something inside you shifts. You stop running after approval because you finally understand that most people's opinions are meaningless. The people you once tried to impress. They don't have their own lives figured out. The system that told you what success should look like, it was never designed for men like you. By 30, you start pulling away, not because you're bitter, but because you see the game for what it is. You stop justifying your choices. You let go of relationships that drain you. You no longer waste energy proving your worth to people who will never truly appreciate it. Instead, you focus on results. You move in silence, and while others talk, you execute. And by 40, you become untouchable. You don't argue. You let your success settle the debate. You don't seek validation. You let your self-discipline speak for itself. You don't beg for respect. You command it without a single word. The man who once tried to fit in has now become a force that others can't ignore So if you're in your 20s, stop worrying about being misunderstood. If you're in your 30s, embrace the quiet power of detachment. And if you're in your 40s, understand this: you were never meant to be seen as just another man in the crowd. You were meant to build your own path, walk it alone if necessary, and let the world adjust to you. Number 3. Psychological armor becomes bulletproof. In your 20s, you took more hits than you could count. Betrayals from people you trusted, failures that shook your confidence, and painful lessons that felt unfair at the time. You questioned yourself, second-guessed your instincts, and at times even wondered if you were the problem. You let people in too easily. You gave too many second chances. You tolerated disrespect because you believed in seeing the good in people. But by 30, that version of you starts to fade. You stop bleeding over wounds that should have healed long ago. You learn that not everyone deserves access to you. You recognize manipulation before it even begins. You stop explaining yourself to people who never had your best interests at heart. The guilt trips, the emotional traps, the subtle power plays, none of it works on you anymore. Then comes 40, and by then your mind is a fortress. You don't just sense deception, you see it, clear as day. You don't just handle pressure, you thrive under it. The man who once struggled to say no now walks away without a second thought. The one who once felt guilty for choosing himself now prioritizes his peace above all. People will wonder how you became so unshakable. The truth? You earned it. You took every betrayal, every failure, and every painful lesson and turned it into armor. While others remained emotionally reactive, you became calculated. While they fell apart over minor setbacks, you stood firm. By 40, you don't just move differently, you think differently. You're no longer driven by emotions, but by strategy. You don't let people pull you into their chaos because you know peace is the ultimate power. So if you're still in your 20s, understand that the pain is shaping you. If you're in your 30s, embrace the transition into emotional resilience. And if you're in your 40s, take pride in the fact that nothing and no one can shake the man you've become. And number 4, you become comfortable with being feared. In your 20s, people misunderstood you. They saw your independence as arrogance, your silence as weakness, and your refusal to conform as rebellion. You weren't like the others, you didn't seek approval, you didn't crave attention, and you didn't play the games they expected you to. They tried to box you in, label you, and make you explain yourself. By 30, the misunderstandings turn into resentment. People start to realize you're not just going through a phase. You're not avoiding them. You genuinely don't need them. You're not quiet because you're unsure. You're quiet because you're focused. Your ability to move alone, to think for yourself, to make decisions without external validation, it unsettles them. They wanted you to be like them, to care about the same trivial things, to seek the same empty validation. But you don't. And that's when the discomfort begins. Then comes 40, and by then they fear you. Not because you're aggressive or loud, but because you're the one thing they can't control. You don't react the way they expect. You don't get pulled into emotional games. You don't explain yourself to those who have no business questioning you. That level of self-possession, it's rare. And people fear what they don't understand. By 40, you've seen it all: manipulation, deception, fake friendships, power plays. You're immune to them now. You recognize when someone's trying to guilt trip you, when they're trying to make you doubt yourself, when they're testing your boundaries. And instead of falling for it, you shut it down, calmly, efficiently, without a second thought. They may not say it out loud, but they know. You're the man they can't predict, can't sway, can't intimidate, and that terrifies them. So if you're in your 20s, stop worrying about being misunderstood. If you're in your 30s, embrace the discomfort others feel around your independence. And if you're in your 40s, stand firm, because the world always fears a man it cannot control. Number 5. Weak relationships die off naturally. In your 20s, you tolerated a lot. You kept friends around who drained you. You entertained relationships that lacked depth. You let people overstay their welcome in your life because you thought loyalty meant endurance, even when it was one-sided. You ignored red flags, made excuses for others, and poured energy into connections that did nothing but exhaust you. Then 30 hits and you change, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You stop chasing friendships that only exist when you put in the effort. You stop tolerating people who drain your peace, waste your time, or expect you to carry the emotional load. You start cutting ties, not with anger, not with drama, but with indifference. You don't argue, you don't explain, you just disengage. And the result? The weak relationships fall off naturally. The people who only liked you when you were easy to manipulate disappear. The ones who thrived on your people-pleasing tendencies move on to their next target. You don't even have to push them away. They leave when they realize they no longer have access to the version of you that tolerated nonsense. By 40, something incredible happens. The only people left in your life deserve to be there. They don't crowd your space, they respect it. They don't drain your energy, they add to it. There's no need for constant validation, for small talk, or pretending to be something you're not. Your circle may be smaller, but it's solid. The truth is, real relationships don't require maintenance. They flow. No guilt-tripping, no keeping score, no forcing conversations. And the best part, you no longer fear losing people because you've learned that the right ones stay and the wrong ones self-destruct. So if you're in your 20s, don't be afraid to let go. If you're in your 30s, embrace the cleanup. And if you're in your 40s, enjoy the peace of knowing that every person in your life earned their place. Number 6, financial leverage finally kicks in. Most people spend their 20s trying to impress. They buy the latest gadgets, chase trends, and throw money at temporary pleasures, all to look successful rather than become successful. They rack up debt to keep up appearances, believing they have all the time in the world to get serious later. But later comes fast, and by 30, the cracks start to show. Sigma males, however, play a different game. While everyone else was spending, you were investing. While they were chasing clout, you were stacking skills. While they were caught up in fleeting pleasures, you were focused on long-term moves. You understood early that financial freedom isn't about making more. It's about keeping more, growing more, and controlling your time. And by 30, it starts paying off. You're no longer drowning in unnecessary expenses. You don't live paycheck to paycheck like the masses. You've built a financial foundation that makes you dangerous, not in a reckless way, but in the way that no one can control you. You don't need to stay in a toxic job just to survive. You don't need to tolerate disrespect just to keep the bills paid. You don't need to compromise your time for someone else's gain. By 40, it's not just a foundation, it's a fortress. You've built income streams that work for you, not the other way around. You've positioned yourself so that when others panic about money, you stay calm. While they scramble to keep up, you move with confidence. Your financial discipline has given you something most men never achieve: options. And options are power. You can walk away, you can say no, you can live on your terms. So if you're in your 20s, stop wasting time trying to look rich. If you're in your 30s, double down on building true financial security. And if you're in your 40s, enjoy the power that comes from knowing you made the right moves when it mattered most. Number 7, you develop a predator's mindset. Not in the sense of harming others, but in how you see, think, and move. In your 20s, you reacted to life. You chased opportunities, fought unnecessary battles, and wasted energy on people who weren't worth your time. You played the game the way they wanted you to, impulsive, emotional, and eager to prove yourself. You were a hunter without strategy, running after anything that looked like a prize. But by 30, something shifts. You stop moving blindly. You stop chasing every opportunity that comes your way. Instead, you study, you observe. You learn to read people, not just their words, but their intentions, their patterns, their weaknesses. You start seeing things before they happen. You recognize setups, manipulation tactics, and emotional traps before they can touch you. You develop patience, real patience, the kind that makes others uncomfortable because they don't know what you're thinking. Then 40 arrives, and by then you are lethal, not in physical aggression, but in precision. You don't react, you calculate. You don't waste energy, you strike only when necessary. And when you do, it's fast, clean, and decisive. You don't fight pointless battles because you don't need to. You've already won before they even realize they're playing. People start to fear your silence. They feel uneasy because you don't give them the emotional reactions they expect. They can't manipulate you, they can't provoke you, and they can't predict your next move. That's power. Most men never reach this level because they're too distracted, too emotional, or too reckless. But a Sigma male? He masters the game by refusing to play it the way others do. So if you're in your 20s, start sharpening your mind. If you're in your 30s, refine your patience. And if you're in your 40s, know this: you are no longer a participant, you are the unseen force that dictates the game. Number 8, you no longer chase, you attract. In your 20s, you ran after everything: opportunities, relationships, approval. You knocked on doors, made compromises, and tried to prove yourself. You believed effort alone could get you what you wanted. But effort without leverage is just wasted energy. You spent time chasing people who didn't respect you, jobs that underpaid you, and social circles that never valued you. And what did you get? A lot of exhaustion and very little in return. Then you hit 30 and you stop. Not because you give up, but because you wake up. You realize that chasing is a sign of lack, a signal that you need something from others. And the moment you shift from needing to building, everything changes. Instead of chasing validation, you build self-respect. Instead of chasing money, you create value. Instead of chasing relationships, you cultivate strength and presence. By 40, you no longer pursue because you don't need to. The right things come to you, not out of luck, but because you've become the type of person worth coming to. Opportunities now seek you because you bring something rare to the table. People respect your time because they know it's limited and valuable. Women admire you not because you chase them, but because they see a man who doesn't need to. This is the difference between a man who asks for a seat at the table and a man who builds the table. The world is drawn to strength, independence, and quiet confidence. And when you become the kind of man who doesn't chase everything that matters, wealth, respect, power, even love, naturally gravitates toward you. So if you're still chasing, stop. Shift your focus. Build something so solid, so undeniable, that the right things have no choice but to come knocking. Because when you become the gravity, you don't chase, you pull. Number 9, you're no longer impressed, you're focused. In your 20s, it was easy to be impressed. Flashy cars, expensive watches, and men who could talk a big game all seemed like the pinnacle of success. You thought confidence was about loudness, wealth was about appearances, and status was about who had the most influence. You chased the illusion, because that's what the world told you mattered. Then 30 arrives and the mask slips. You start seeing the cracks. You realize that most people flexing wealth are drowning in debt. The loudest ones in the room are usually the weakest. The men who seek status are often the most insecure. You stop being impressed by noise, surface-level success, or empty bravado. Instead, you start valuing something real: execution, consistency, and quiet power. By 40, your focus is razor-sharp. You no longer care about who has the nicest suit or the biggest following. You care about who can deliver, who has mastered their craft, who has the discipline to keep growing, who has built something that can't be shaken. You respect the man who operates in silence and still dominates, not the one constantly seeking validation. Your mindset shifts completely. You no longer seek to impress, you seek to build. While others chase clout, you chase mastery. While they try to fit in, you carve your own lane. And because of that, your presence alone speaks volumes. People sense the difference. They may not understand it, but they feel it. You move with purpose while they still chase illusions. The world is full of distractions designed to impress the weak-minded. But a Sigma male? He sees through it. He knows real value isn't in what's shown, it's in what's proven. And by 40, you don't just see it, you embody it. Number 10, you control the game instead of playing it. In your 20s, you were just another piece on the board, pushed around by expectations, obligations, and the illusion of success that society dangled in front of you. You played by the rules you were given, believing that if you worked hard enough, followed the script, and did what was expected, you'd eventually win. But somewhere along the way, you started to notice something. The game was rigged. By 30, the illusion shatters. You begin to see how the system really works, how people climb the ranks, not by talent, but by connections, how loyalty is often a one-way street, and how the ones who truly win aren't the ones who compete the hardest, but the ones who step back and study the game itself. This is when you stop being a player and start becoming a strategist. You no longer react, you anticipate, you don't rush, you calculate. While others are still chasing status and validation, you focus on positioning yourself where real power lies. In independence, in knowledge, and in the ability to move unseen. Then comes 40. And by then, you're not just playing the game differently, you're rewriting the entire thing. You've built your own path, your own rules, and your own way of operating. The rat race, you're not in it. The competition, it doesn't concern you. While most are stuck running in circles, you dictate the pace, moving with precision, while others scramble. And that's the part that unsettles people the most. You're no longer predictable. You're not chasing promotions, clout, or approval. You don't need permission and you don't need validation. You operate on your own time, by your own rules, and at your own pace. So if you're in your 20s, stop blindly playing the game. If you're in your 30s, focus on mastering the rules. And if you're in your 40s, embrace the fact that you no longer compete, you control. Number 11, women finally understand your value. In your 20s, you were invisible to most women, not because you lacked substance, but because they were too distracted by the noise, chasing the loud, flashy, and easily predictable types. The men who played the game, who sought attention, who bent over backward to impress. You didn't do any of that. You weren't desperate for validation, you weren't trying to prove yourself, and you weren't interested in shallow performances. And because of that, many overlooked you. By 30, things start to shift. The party boys, they're losing their charm. The smooth talkers, their words no longer hold weight. And the men who once seemed exciting, they start revealing cracks, immaturity, instability, and a lack of real direction. That's when your self-sufficiency begins to stand out. Your ability to move in silence, to handle life without seeking applause, to be disciplined while others still drift, it becomes magnetic. Women start to notice that you're not just different, you're rare. Then comes 40, and by then you're no longer just attractive, you're an anomaly. A man who doesn't chase, doesn't settle, and isn't easily swayed. You've built a life on your terms. You've cultivated discipline, stability, and a mindset that's immune to emotional games. And the result? You're desired, but not easily attained. Women who once overlooked you now admire you. Some even regret not seeing your value sooner. But here's the thing, you don't care anymore. That's the real power. You're no longer moved by attention or flattery. You don't need validation. You don't mold yourself to be more appealing. You are who you are, and that alone makes you more attractive than any scripted game ever could. So if you're in your 20s, don't chase. If you're in your 30s, let your discipline set you apart. And if you're in your 40s, embrace the reality. You are no longer an option. You are the standard. The best chapters are still ahead. The world rushes men to succeed young. It tells you that if you haven't made it by 25, you're already behind. But that's a lie designed to keep you chasing approval instead of building power. A Sigma male doesn't peak in his youth. He rises with time. Your 20s were never supposed to be your prime. They were the foundation, the silent years, the years where you took the hits, learned the lessons, and sharpened your instincts while others wasted time on short-lived highs. That's why when you hit 30, everything shifts. You move differently, not out of arrogance, but because you no longer seek validation. You've seen the traps, you've studied the patterns, and now you play the game on your terms. By 40, you're not just experienced, you're dangerous, not reckless, but precise, not desperate, but in control. You don't beg for opportunities, they come to you. You don't chase people, they gravitate toward you. Because power isn't about noise, it's about presence. And your presence alone will be enough to command respect. Most men will never get to this level. They'll stay trapped in cycles of doubt, regret, and submission. But you've done the work. You've built the patience, the discipline, and the mindset that separates you from the rest. That's why your life isn't slowing down. It's just beginning. So if you're in your 20s, prepare. If you're in your 30s, trust the process. And if you're in your 40s, own your power. Because a Sigma male doesn't fade with time, he becomes unstoppable. Thank you for watching, gents, and God bless you.